Khai stood beside the mayor on the makeshift podium, pulled out 2 pens from his back pocket, and handed one to the mayor. The mayor cheerily grabbed the pen from Khai, and just as they were about to seal the agreement by penning their signatures on the treaty papers, a lanky man ran across the field to their makeshift round table. His arms flared wildly in the air as he ran toward the meeting point. All head turned in his direction. He bent over. His hand held his knees as he gasped loudly for air. The questions hung in the air and laid clear on their faces as he tried to catch his breath. "There's B." A long drag of air did nothing to remove the breathlessness as he spoke again. "There's been reports of at." He hunched over and took a final draw of air before he rose to his full height, his expression a mix of seriousness and worry. His cheeks reddened as he took a look at the faces watching his every move. Julie felt sorry for him. He'd been hunched over for minutes in the presence of people he probably looked up to. He straightened his spine as he said, "There's been recent reports of an attack. A human has been severely injured, and evidences so far point at it being a werewolf attack." His voice became a whisper as he added his last statement, the fear behind his worried eyes. Yet another proof to how much the humans feared the werewolf society despite all the bravado they tried to portray. Chaos broke out as outraged voices overshadowed his barely audible voice. Julie strained her ears to hear him as he continued despite the outburst of curses from the human representatives. "This is what we just spoke about, isn't it?" Raphael was the first to speak loud enough to be heard over the multiple voices on the field. Khai's attention snapped in his direction almost immediately, but unlike the previous times when he went silent and counted his words, this time he made a motion of raising his shoulder, puffing his chest, and stood his ground. "They claim to be on our side, claim to be in total agreement with the treaty and what it states, but yet the number of attacks keep rising, attacks on humans without offense by your kind." He spat, the venom in his words almost palpable. Was it an isolated attack? The mayor, who had not said a word or made a sound since the announcement, despite how freely everyone else had aired their complaints, finally asked. The informant shook his head in disagreement before he said, "No, it was on the busy part of town. I'd say it was quite the opposite." He winced as the words left his lips, almost like they left a sour taste in his mouth. The mayor's eyes flared. "A public attack?" His voice was so low even straining didn't help much with hearing them. But regardless, it was impossible to miss the barely contained rage he held back. He slammed his eyes shut, and when he opened them again, every human representative went quiet as he stalked towards Khai, his steps rigid like he was boiling with rage he couldn't dispose of. "A public attack?" The outburst was so sudden and unexpected, Julie flinched back despite Khai's hold on her hands. She was just glad when she looked around and noticed she wasn't the only one who thought it wise to take a step back. Khai stood unfazed. From how tight his grip on her hand had become, Julie could tell that he was on the verge of anger himself. But unlike everyone else and the mayor who had lost it and basically rained a buttload of curses at the werewolf society or the other side of the coin, he maintained his composure. His face gave nothing away as he stood there and just listened to what everyone had to say. Khai is quiet the entire way home. He tried his best not to show just how worried he was in the presence of the human representatives. There really was no room for weakness when it came to them, when he had so many people watching and just waiting for that crack in his composure to attack. But as he sat in the car and held the steering wheel in a death grip, with no one plastic around, just Julie, someone he could trust with anything. She didn't care whether he was alpha or not. Heck, he still wasn't sure if she cared at all, but it was better than having her pretend to like his presence and respect him, only to stab him in the back. He shrugged his shoulders. The tension made his clothes so much tighter than they actually were. How severe was severe anyways? How many people were attacked? Were there any deaths? Survivors? Who could be involved? Who amongst the packs would be so bold as to not only make an attack on the humans, but also do so publicly, risking their alliances, risking the secret they had held so close to their chest, with only a few human representatives being informed about their existence? Who? Khai let out an animalistic growl, The frustration ate deeper at him the longer he swelled on it. The harder he tried to trace the tracks back to who the guilty party was and why they had bothered with such an act in the first place. "Are you okay? What do you think?" He snapped and immediately regretted it. She wasn't the reason the werewolves were so damn stubborn and felt the need to prove their power all the time. Her lips curled in anger. "I know it's been quite a day, but there's no reason to transfer that to me," she fired back. Khai released a long breath. It didn't do much to calm his temper, but he was at least thinking straight enough to know he messed up. "I know. I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have snapped like that. It's just a lot right now." Julie let out a breath. She had half expected him to be rude about it and give a million reasons why she should have known better than to ask an obvious question like that and expect a proper answer. Of course he wasn't fine. They had just gone to a meeting to solidify their position with the human representatives and smooth things over with both societies. But instead of meeting an agreement and signing the treaty, they met a dead end instead, an even bigger obstacle, a public attack. She didn't know what it meant, but the way Khai's face had immediately darkened said all she needed to know. A witch being involved took things to a whole different level that neither society was ready for. A witch had been involved with the issues with Adrian as well, an issue that had almost taken their lives, would probably have taken her life if Khai hadn't shown up at the right time. If Ada hadn't felt the need to go against Khai's wish to be a solo wolf on the path of revenge and follow closely behind him, despite the obvious danger. "I know, I probably shouldn't have asked a question so obvious anyways, but everything would be fine. I believe it would be," she assured. Khai tried on a smile for her sake, but if he was being totally honest with himself, he didn't believe anything would ever be actually all right if he didn't do something about it. If he didn't actually find the witch behind it all and put a stop to them once and for all. But for her sake, he would plaster the brightest smile he could muster, and he wouldn't complain or point out how life wasn't a bed of roses. The man in charge let out a defeated breath. "Fine, you win. But I'd have to ask that the lady stays back." His eyes snapped to mine for a millisecond before they returned their attention back to the man who had not to directly threaten to end the life of a police officer. Of course he didn't mean that. He didn't mean any of it. He was probably just mad, and if the roles were reversed, Julie would be pissed enough to say literally anything to get the job done too. "And why can't she come along?" Khai questioned, his brows arched, daring him to say something out of line or something just simply downright stupid. "She's not," he began to say, but cut himself off as Khai's eyes darkened and his eyes narrowed into slits. He wasn't cussing, pacing, or breathing down the man's neck. No, he was deathly calm. Literally the calm before the storm, as he waited for the man's next words. They would determine if he'd show them the surveillance room with a broken hand or with an intact one. "She's what?" Khai urged him to continue. His fingers tapped slowly on the counter. The man looked between Khai and Julie so quickly, like he had to make a decision in a split second. "She's not one of you." He whispered low enough for only Khai to hear, but Julie was close enough to despite his volume. She didn't know why she felt insulted, or why she suddenly felt the need to defend her association with the Werewolf Society, but she felt an urge so strong she had to lace her hands with Khai to stop it. Khai returned the gesture as his voice boomed across the room. "She's my wife. I believe that makes her more one of us than anything else." He fired. Julie could tell from the way his fingers tightened over hers that he was trying really hard to control his temper, and how impatient he was getting the longer the balding man wasted their time. "I guess so." Julie had to give the man his credit. He was bold, unfearing. Well, maybe that had more to do with the fact that he'd never seen Khai at his prime state of battle. Maybe it had more to do with ignorance being bliss than the man actually owning a strong backbone. "Come with me." He gestures towards them as he led the way to the surveillance room. It wasn't too far from the entrance room, just a few steps straight down the hall, a turn to the right, and a final one to the left. The lights dimmed the deeper they moved down the hall, and closer to the surveillance room, their eyes strained against the darkness. as they stood before the door that separated the hallway from the room that held hopefully everything they needed to pinpoint the attacker and their reason for attack. The man pushed the door back easily. It was either weakening already, or he wasn't actually human, because those arms looked nothing like arms that could push 100 pounds of metal with one hand. He quietly watched as they followed his footsteps and stepped into the almost completely dark room. These are the surveillance cameras covering the highway. He pushed a few buttons, and about 7 screens went black for a moment, only to come back on the next with a different footage. Those are for the stores around the areas. He pointed at the screens in question. Khai hummed and took the seat facing the cameras, showing the different angles of the highway. Pausing briefly, he pulled a seat out. "You shouldn't be standing for so long in your condition," he muttered, his focus stuck on the screen. "Thank you," she whispered and carefully settled into the seat beside him, the one facing the cameras covering the stores. Her eyes locked with the policeman, and the urge to smack him upside the head returned. He gave her a skeptical look, like he was unsure whether to chase her away from the room or just avoid trouble and let her stay. Was her being there so bad anyways? Julie ignored him and turned her focus back to the screens, leaving the policeman to stand behind them. Her finger tapped over the mouse as she went from one footage to another, one angle to another. Her eyes widened as they settled on a group. She'd seen those faces before. She pulled up a previous footage she had seen before of a man putting on a beanie. In the midst of the crowd, he looked inconspicuous enough to blend in, simple enough that she almost missed it, skipped it, but that tattoo, it rode up from beneath his shirt and crawl up his neck, touching his jaw lightly. That hadn't been enough to draw her attention, though, not until she went from store to store and noticed about 3 other persons with either beanies, headbands, or handbands, all of the same color, red. If she hadn't seen the last footage, they could have been just people who happened to wear similar colors on the same day. But she had, and she had seen the same group of people gathered together at a section of a clothing store. The same store that got attacked. "Hey, come see this!" She called to Khai. The sound of a chair scrapping against tiles soon followed before she felt Khai's presence beside her. "What's up?" His eyes darted towards the screen he'd been looking at before she called, before his full attention was hers. Julie pointed at the shop where the group of 4 were gathered, 2 males and 2 females, all spotting a hint of red. "Okay, what am I supposed to be looking out for here?" His eyes squinted at the screen. "Notice that guy with the neck tattoo and red beanie?" She pointed at the man trying to blend into the crowd on the opposite street from the fashion store. Khai nodded. "Now, notice the lady with the red scarf?" Another nod. "See the other guy across the street with a red hoodie?" "Yeah." "Notice any pattern?" "Are you in any way referring to the red because that could be a pure coincidence?" he argued, skeptical. "Yeah, I thought so too until I saw her." She trailed off as she pulled up the screen with the lady who, without a doubt, had to be their leader. "The image is a bit blurry, okay? I take that back. It's very blurry. I mean, her face is totally obscured, but look at her hair." She pointed at the lady who, if she were to go by her looks, was totally harmless. But anyone leading people who looked that dangerous, including a werewolf, had to be strong, powerful, and she felt sorry for whoever it was that let that sway their guard. Khai's attention returned to the first image of the guy with the red hoodie. "That's a werewolf," he whispered, confirming her fear. She'd never wished she'd been wrong about using a person's build to guess if they were human or werewolf till that moment. Even with the oversized hoodie covering most of him, it was still quite easy to see he was very ripped underneath. The strength rippled beneath the pitiful outfit with each supposedly inconspicuous step he took towards the store. He had that ready-for-battle expression most werewolves held without even trying. "I figured," she agreed. "Now check this out." She pulled up the footage of the group in the pants section of the fashion store. They watched as the group exchanged words. From the looks of it, they were having a heated conversation that ended only when the lady, who still somehow had her face blurred even in that footage, stepped in and began walking away. Something felt off about her. She just had to be human like the rest. But what unsettled Julie was why they all obeyed her, why they followed her lead. Immediately, she began walking away from the argument. Khai's face morphed from cool indifference to one of surprise as he watched the group. They watched and waited for the attack, waited for the first sign of an attack, or something relating to an attack. Julie's feet tapped against the floor as her impatience grew. She tapped a button, and the footage immediately sped up, jumping from time frame to time frame. Even the littlest of signs would be enough. She pleaded internally for even just one clue, one confirmation that they were behind the attack. Nothing, not even an argument with a staff or a pickpocket crime. "We need to go check that store out at least, clear the doubts, or get the confirmation we need," he stated simply, already on his feet, an arm outstretched for her to take. Julie swiped off the footages and took it, letting him lead the way. They thanked the policeman and exited the station. The fashion store wasn't too far away. It was just 5 streets from the station, so getting there took all but 30 minutes. The store looked exactly like it had in the footage. The fact that it stood taller than it looked in the footage had to be the only thing different about it. The most shocking thing was the fact that it still stood tall, no damage whatsoever. It was either they later changed their minds to attack the store, or it had just been a quick stop before their actual target. The latter was more likely, but Julie wished with everything that it wasn't the truth, because that would only mean they'd be back to square one. "Doesn't look like what I had been expecting." Khai pushed the doors to the store and walked through, gesturing for Julie to follow closely behind. The receptionist head lifted as the overhead bells above the door signaled their entrance. Okay, if they truly were there, the staff would have seen them with bells as loud as that. "Good day, sir, ma'am. Welcome to Talia's. How may I be of assistance?" She smiled at them, surprising for such a high-end store, but it was a welcome change. She waved at the brunette, who was neatly clad in a baby blue button-up. "I don't think a werewolf was responsible for that," Julie blurted. "At least, not a normal one." She added quickly, "Werewolves and normal in the same sentence. I see someone's adapting fast." He smirked. Julie blushed but shoved her hair forcefully over her face. "I'm serious." She groaned. "I know." He let out a heavy breath. "I considered it, but I wouldn't like to jump into conclusions only to find out that I was sorely mistaken from the get-go. But it really can't be. Whoever she was, she didn't have the usual werewolfy look." He arched his brows. "Werewolfy? You know what I mean," she fired. Khai fought back a smile. It was no time to make jokes or smile. People had been hurt, worse, it happened publicly, and by all indications werewolves were involved. "I do. I'd investigate further." Julie nodded without a word. "Fine." She muttered and turned her attention back to the highway. The drive home was quiet after that. It was relaxing to see the wind whip past them as Khai sped down the road at a decent enough speed, not his usual psycho-level pace. The attack must have really gotten to him, Julie decided. The automatic gates part as Khai pushed a button on his phone. He rolled the car in easily without a word and shut the ignition off just before the house. His spine straightened, his hands stilled against the steering wheel. His eyes remained fixed on the doorway. Julie turned to see what had gotten such a reaction out of him, but before she could even get a proper glance at the lady who stood patiently by the doorway, Khai was out of the car. "Wait here. I'd only be a minute," he instructed, his gaze fixed on the lady. "As if." Julie snorted and pulled the seatbelt away from her body as she exited the car, moving in tow with him. The lady smiled brightly as they got closer. She had to admit she was stunning, not in the runway or model type of way, but in the cute but confident way. "Hey there, you must be Julie." She stretched out a hand in invitation. Julie eyed her slender arm with skepticism. She looked to Khai for some direction or something. For all she knew, the lady could be a serial killer or something. She had a very innocent-looking face, the typical too good, too innocent to hurt a fly look. She had blonde hair with the most unusual pair of blue eyes. They held a hint of gray in them, but when looked at closer, they were more stormy than innocent. They held years of knowledge, years of experience, with something even darker than she'd seen in Khai's eyes in them. Julie's eyes swept over her. from her perfect ponytail to the black corset too she wore so perfectly and paired with a pair of white wide-bottom pants. She had to admit, whoever she was, she had style. But style didn't and never would equal safe. "Oh, come on now. I don't bite," she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You could ask Khai. He knows everything there is to know about me and then some." She smirked, her eyes drifted towards Khai, who still stood stoic as ever. Their eyes locked, and the warning behind them was glaringly clear. She smiled a sugar-sweet smile and turned her attention back to the interesting human girl. She rolled her eyes when she still wouldn't move or make any attempt to do anything but stare at her like she was a freaking unicorn. "I'm Amma. I'm sure you would have heard of me." Julie tested the name on her tongue, but she didn't respond. She, however, returned the gesture and took her hand. It was tougher than she'd expected, quite the opposite of what a person would assume when they saw how delicate she looked. "See? That wasn't so bad now, was it?" Sue smiled, but unlike Kai's smile that brought a smile to her own face, Amma's smile made her want to run and never look back. Like it was obvious she was smiling, but at the same time it was caught between a frown and a grimace. It was, to put it simply, weird and unsettling. "How do you know Khai?" The words were out of her mouth before she could even think about stopping them or rephrasing her statement. "I think we should go inside." Khai suddenly spoke after ignoring her since they'd rode into the house to see her by the doorway. Julie's eyes narrowed into slits as she watched him. He made special effort to avoid her eyes like she had lasers behind them or something. "Sure, the sun is scorching hot anyways. Been dying to hear you say that." She fanned her face, making Julie immediately irritated with how extra she had to be all the damn time. Kai's eyes flared as he flared at Amma. "By us, I meant my wife and I, no outsiders." He snapped, his arm wrapped around her waist. He pulled her through the doorway, only to be stopped by a leg clad in thigh-high boots. "Outsider? Really, Khai?" She snorted, right on their tail. "I'd always find it crazy how easy it is for you to toss years of mutual love and respect to the wind like it was nothing." The look in her eyes had gone from playful and dismissive to angry and hurt. She blinked and it was gone like it had never been there to begin with. "Wait. Love and respect? Khai, who is she?" "I believe she already introduced herself." He grunted, barely meeting her gaze. "Let me rephrase that. Who is she to you? What relationship do y'all have to share years of mutual love and respect?" Kai's eyes flared for a second. The proud, unchallenged alpha revealed itself in that second before he let out a breath, defeated. "She's Mim," he began to say. "I'm Amma, his ex-girlfriend." Amma beat him to the punch. Her smile stretched wider as she added, "Oh, sorry, I meant his ex-mate." She added like her first statement wasn't shock enough. "His what?" Last thing he mentioned about her was she leaving him to chase her career, her modeling career. Julie's eyes swept over the supposed ex-mate again, as it went from her perfectly styled hair down her laundered outfit to her shiny heels. She could see how she could pass for a model. It was in her sense of style, confident attitude, and the way she walked like the world was beneath her heel. She looked to Khai, pleaded with her eyes that he'd dispute what Amma had said, but he wasn't even looking her way. Instead, he glared fiercely at Amma, like she'd melt if he shot daggers her way enough. Khai could feel her eyes on him, but he was too mad at Amma to care. She had some nerve showing up in his home after rejecting him without any regards for his feelings or his future responsibility to bring forth an heir. "You shouldn't be here." His tone was anything but friendly as he pulled Julie away from her and towards himself. "But I am," Amma retorted. Her smile disappeared to give way to a pitiful look. "I miss us, Khai," she whispered loud enough for him to hear. Kai's blood boiled as he watched her stand there, acting like she was the innocent one in everything, like she wasn't the one who broke things off. He slammed his eyes shut to stop from lashing out. No, she wasn't going to get a reaction out of him, not this time. "Again, you shouldn't be here, and I'm sure you know what those multiple runways look like to know this isn't one of them." "Khai, darling." She approached him only to stop when he stepped back. Her eyes clouded as they settled on the hold he had on Julie. "My village was attacked, Khai," she confessed. Her eyes fell, unable to hold his gaze any longer. "We aren't sure. But we think it's the rogues. I don't feel safe there anymore, Khai, she explained, her voice on the edge of breaking. I'm sorry to hear that, Amma, but I'm sure one of your agents would be glad to get their favorite star a new home. Khai countered, his voice softer, despite how hard he fought not to be swayed by her poorly hidden tears. His grip on Julie tightened as she began closing the distance. Khai, we both know I can't explain pack issues to just any human. Plus, you're the only one I can really trust to help without motive. She confessed. Her eyes met his. She was at his mercy, and she didn't bother hiding it. Khai's resolve lost another piece of strength as his eyes locked with hers. Even before he said it, he knew he was going to regret it, but still. So what do you want me to do? I need a place to stay, just for a few. I promise it wouldn't be for too long and I'd leave without hassle, she rushed. I just really don't know where else to go or what else to do right now. She muttered. Khai felt Julie grow rod stiff beside him, but he already knew he could just see her so lost and push her out. She might have been heartless and callous and rejected him and the love he had to offer, but he didn't have to be like her. He could be the bigger person. He could take the higher road. Fine, he breathed. He broke her gaze. You can't possibly be serious, Julie flared. Really, Khai? You want to bring your ex-mate into our home? She snapped, beyond trying to be cool-headed and understanding of the situation. Julie, not now. Khai forced out. No, I can take anything from you, but this is crossing the line. If she's stranded, you could get her a hotel room or something. She doesn't have to live here, no matter how short. I'm not comfortable with it, and I should be your first consideration in all this. She really should be. He'd never seen her that angry, and he hated himself before he even said, Julie, this is still my house. She's staying, and that's final. Her eyes widened in shock at his tight grip, but behind that shock was an emotion he couldn't quite place a finger on. Her eyes slipped closed as she released a defeated breath. With a voice so low he had to strain to hear her, she confessed, I know it's hard to believe, but I was worried, Khai. I just needed to make sure you actually were doing well for myself. Her eyes met his, and as much as he hated himself for doing so, his grip on her neck loosened slightly. We had once been so in love with each other, we barely spent a day apart. Of course I'd have to be heartless not to miss that. She looked away, her gaze distant. Not to miss you. She added, her eyes trailed back to his. His fist tightened on her neck. He wasn't going to fall for that bullshit again. You left. You didn't even look back or give me a chance to fight for us. You just made the choice and left. For years, you never looked back, he recounted. So again I ask, why are you really here? He sneered, ignoring her little gasps for air. He pinned her with a glare as his resolve solidified. His gut was more times than not right. She didn't just show up because she was suddenly worried about him. As much as a part of him, a very minuscule part, wanted to believe she got a conscience out of the blue. He knew Amma better than that. She was selfish and as crooked as they come when she really wanted something. Whatever her reason for coming, it couldn't be good, especially if she'd felt the need to lie to be allowed into his home. His eyes snapped to her fingers. They tapped almost unnoticed against the wall, a nervous habit of hers. What was she hiding? She avoided his gaze like her life depended on it. Her fingers tapped faster, the longer he remained silent. Khai was the first to break the silence. I would ask you for the last time, Amma. Why are you really here? He demanded, his tone deadly calm. Her breathing increased, her chest heaved up and down at a faster pace. Her eyes snapped to his only to snap away before he could register any of the emotions that swirled behind them. Khai pushed harder against her neck. I should be the one with you, okay? Not her, she snapped, her breath shallow as she struggled for air she couldn't care for. I'm a Luna, born to be an alpha. It's only natural that I be your Luna now that you've successfully taken what is yours. Don't you think? Her gaze was a gentle caress against his cheeks as the plea behind her eyes burned bright. Khai's hold on her throat weakened as she locked eyes with his. Getting bolder, she continued, I really can't see how a basic human could be Luna of a werewolf pack, your werewolf pack. She regretted it immediately, the moment her head slammed against the wall. You would do well not to speak ill of my wife, the mother of my pup. He whispered by her ear. Shivers ran through her as the threat behind those words registered in her brain. She swallowed hard. He needed to hear it. Someone had to tell him. If she died because she chose to be the one too, then so be it. The child could be kept and trained as a successor, your successor. It doesn't have to affect our relationship. It doesn't matter. I'd happily care for the child like I birthed it, if that's what it would take for you to see how much I still love you. Her eyes searched his frantically. He needed to believe her. He had to. Something wasn't right. It didn't add up. No matter the angle she curved her reason, no matter the sugar-sweet stories she told, he couldn't just shake the feeling that she wasn't being totally honest with him, could just believe she had his best interest at heart. She never did. She never thought about anyone but herself. She always went for what she could benefit the most from in every situation. What did she have to benefit from her proposal? His money? The child? His life? What? He hated how clueless she made him. The only thing he was certain of was she definitely wasn't back because the love they shared suddenly blossomed in her chest and became unbearable for her. What did he have to lose? She wasn't going to tell him anything, so there was no point pushing it. He couldn't actually kill her, no matter how much pain she caused him. Even if he somehow found the heart to do so, her bloodline was equally powerful. There would be repercussions, consequences not only he would suffer. He let go of her. She was in the human society. If he couldn't kill her, he could at least keep a close eye on her. Plus, he couldn't allow her get hurt while she was there. Her family wouldn't take excuses. Everything he'd tried to build here would be pulled down to rubbles. She claimed to want a relationship. She was going to get one. Her mistake would be choosing something he cared about. Amma relaxed when Khai didn't make any moves to hurt her or flat out reject her proposal. She smiled happily at him. She hadn't expected him to believe her, even as she stuck her neck quite literally on the line, so seeing him soften at her words slowed her racing heart. She wrapped him in a hug, her arms strained to contain his bulky arms, but she held her position. She laid her head on his chest, her mind at rest. Julie watched the scene unfold with her heart on the floor, a mass of shattered pieces. Amma was hugging Khai, and worse, he didn't push her away. Tears brimmed at the sides of Julie's eyes as she stood by the door. Was everything a lie? She swiped angrily at a stray tear. He still held her. He didn't push her away. He didn't pull her arms from his shoulders. He hugged her back. Did he even mean any of the sweet nonsense he had said to her? The smile on Amma's face as she rested her head on his chest was like a shard of glass shoved into her chest, feeding on every drop of blood her heart had to give. Was he still in love with Amma? Was that why he'd gone rigid the moment he saw her by his doorway? Her head spun with the numerous questions. Why was he still holding her tight? Push her off. She wanted to yell, but what would her reason be? That she had somehow or somewhere along the line fallen hopelessly in love with him? He'd probably laugh in her face and she'd feel even worse. If he even considered staying, what exactly could she offer him? What could she have that would supersede a mate bond? A child? A child that, as far as he was concerned, wasn't even his. Fine, he had promised to care for it like it was his own. But what would he say now that Amma was back in the picture? How could she compete against a mate bond granted by the moon goddess herself? Even if he cherished the child enough, what if her half-human, half-werewolf child couldn't even transform? Even if he decided to try to be considerate, it would be unfair to keep him trapped with a child that without the ability to transform cannot be his heir. She casted one final glance at the two who shared a bond, not only respected by humans but by werewolves, a bond strong enough to pull them back together after so many years, a bond that made Khai forget how hurt he had claimed to be when she left for something as minuscule as her modeling career. She let her hand slip from the doorway, her mind trapped in a web of thoughts as she crossed the hallway and into their shared bedroom. Her eyes scanned the room with tears welling up. What was going to become of what they had going? Was he going to come back to bed tonight and ask her to leave for the guest room? Or worse, do just that, only to bring Amma in? She's the one he loved for so long. He probably still did, and didn't realize just how much he still loved her until she had come into their home. until she had hugged him, even with a woman in the house being already pregnant for him. She wanted more than anything to believe he knew what he was doing, that it was a friendly hug, but a friendly hug didn't last for over 3 minutes. It didn't involve her hands around his shoulders with his rested on her waist like they belonged there, like lovers made for each other. Even the thought of trying to hang on to hope made her heart clench so tight she had to grip her chest to make sure she hadn't lost it. There was no hope, not for Khai and her, and definitely not for the child holding on to Khai as a father. Whether she liked it or not, whether she was ready to accept it or not, whether there was a slim chance or not, she couldn't lie to herself. She was bound to end up hurt. There was no doubt about it. Adrian's betrayal had been a stab in her chest. If Khai betrayed her too, she might not survive it. She might not even want to survive it. Before that happened, she was going to take that control from him. She would leave, keep herself and her heart away from being shattered, away from Khai and the woman he really loved. That's it. Her mind was made up. She was going to talk to Khai the moment he came in to rest the night away. She needed to let him know that she had seen them. She knew what was going on, and she knew what was bound for happen. Her fingers tapped against the sheets as she thought about what his possible reactions could be. How was she going to start? How was she going to explain to Khai that it wasn't a big deal, and that she wasn't going to make it one, but simply step aside for them to be happy and live their lives? How could she say all that to him without shedding a tear, without breaking down, especially while her heart shattered into a million pieces? What made everything even more annoying was the fact that she couldn't even find it in herself to be angry, to lash out at him, to make him feel some sort of pain, even if it were a fraction of what she felt. She couldn't even find it in her to care for it. She just wished he'd walk through that door and tell her that it was all right, that he left Amma, or better, sent her out, and he chose her instead. He didn't need to think it through because she was all he needed, and he loved her. Ugh! Even as she pictured it, she knew it was all in her head, wishful thinking and nothing more. He loved her, still did, and he was not going to pick an ordinary human over a werewolf chosen by the moon goddess herself to be his mate for as long as he was alive. She could not compete with that, and she'd be foolish to. There was only one option, and she was going to leap at it. She was going to come clean to Khai. He had to know that it wasn't okay to raise hopes like that, only to dash them to the wind. But of course, she's hold tight to what's left of her dignity and agree to step aside. Tears brimmed at the sides of Julie's eyes as she stood by the door. Was everything a lie? She swiped angrily at a stray tear. He still held her. He didn't push her away. He didn't pull her arms from his shoulders. He hugged her back. Did he even mean any of the sweet nonsense he had said to her? The smile on Amma's face as she rested her head on his chest was like a shard of glass shoved into her chest, feeding on every drop of blood her heart had to give. Was he still in love with Amma? Was that why he'd gone rigid the moment he saw her by his doorway? Her head spun with the numerous questions. Why was he still holding her tight? Push her off! She wanted to yell, but what would her reason be? That she had somehow or somewhere along the line fallen hopelessly in love with him? He'd probably laugh in her face, and she'd feel even worse. If he even considered staying, what exactly could she offer him? What could she have that would supersede a mate bond? A child? A child that, as far as he was concerned, wasn't even his? Fine. He had promised to care for it like it was his own. But what would he say now that Amma was back in the picture? How could she compete against a mate bond granted by the moon goddess herself? Even if he cherished the child enough, what if her half-human, half-werewolf child couldn't even transform? Even if he decided to try to be considerate, it would be unfair to keep him trapped with a child that without the ability to transform cannot be his heir. She casted one final glance at the two who shared a bond not only respected by humans but by werewolves, a bond strong enough to pull them back together after so many years. A bond that made Khai forget how hurt he had claimed to be when she left for something as minuscule as her modeling career. She let her hand slip from the doorway, her mind trapped in a web of thoughts as she crossed the hallway and into their shared bedroom. Her eyes scanned the room with tears welling up. What was going to become of what they had going? Was he going to come back to bed tonight and ask her to leave for the guest room? Or worse, do just that, only to bring Amma in. She's the one he loved for so long. He probably still did, and didn't realize just how much he still loved her until she had come into their home. Until she had hugged him, even with a woman in the house being already pregnant for him. She wanted more than anything to believe he knew what he was doing, that it was a friendly hug. But a friendly hug didn't last for over 3 minutes. It didn't involve her hands around his shoulders with his rested on her waist like they belonged there, like lovers made for each other. Even the thought of trying to hang on to hope made her heart clench so tight she had to grip her chest to make sure she hadn't lost it. There was no hope, not for Khai and her, and definitely not for the child holding on to Khai as a father. Whether she liked it or not, whether she was ready to accept it or not, whether there was a slim chance or not, she couldn't lie to herself. She was bound to end up hurt. There was no doubt about it. Adrian's betrayal had been a stab in her chest. If Khai betrayed her too, she might not survive it. She might not even want to survive it. Before that happened, she was going to take that control from him. She would leave, keep herself and her heart away from being shattered, away from Khai and the woman he really loved. That's it. Her mind was made up. She was going to talk to Khai the moment he came in to rest the night away. She needed to let him know that she had seen them, she knew what was going on, and she knew what was bound for happen. Her fingers tapped against the sheets as she thought about what his possible reactions could be. How was she going to start? How was she going to explain to Khai that it wasn't a big deal and that she wasn't going to make it one, but simply step aside for them to be happy and live their lives? How could she say all that to him without shedding a tear, without breaking down, especially while her heart shattered into a million pieces? What made everything even more annoying was the fact that she couldn't even find it in herself to be angry, to lash out at him, to make him feel some sort of pain, even if it were a fraction of what she felt. She couldn't even find it in her to care for it. She just wished he'd walk through that door and tell her that it was all right, that he left Amma, or better, sent her out and he chose her instead. He didn't need to think it through because she was all he needed and he loved her. Ugh. Even as she pictured it, she knew it was all in her head, wishful thinking and nothing more. He loved her, still did, and he was not going to pick an ordinary human over a werewolf chosen by the moon goddess herself to be his mate for as long as he was alive. She could not compete with that, and she'd be foolish to. There was only one option, and she was going to leap at it. She was going to come clean to Khai. He had to know that it wasn't okay to raise hopes like that, only to dash them to the wind. But of course, she's hold tight to what's left of her dignity and agree to step aside. Julie stretched her sleeping limbs, her head protested against the movement. Without thinking, her hand reached for the other side of the bed. She couldn't help the disappointment that took over her chest when she felt nothing but sheets and air. Her frown deepened as she forced her eyes open to scan the room. Khai was nowhere to be found. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't that big of a deal, she chanted to herself to keep the shield firmly in place before her heart. It hurt more than it should have, more than she would like to admit. She huffed as she shoved the 2 thick sheets off her body. The warmth immediately disappeared, and in its place was a chill she willingly welcomed with open arms. Anything to distract her from the home invader next door would be more than welcome. An annoyingly cute laugh rang out from the living room. The first could be ignored, but the second carried easily through the halls, loud enough to be heard even if she had still been asleep. Speak of the devil. The groan left her throat before she could even think of pushing of the soft bed. The temptation to slip back in stronger than the tequila she needed to have if she could make it through the day without smashing Amma's head against a wall till she slipped down lifeless. Ugh! Now she sounded like a mindless, bloodthirsty rogue. She slipped on her flip-flops easily and left the room, the messy sheets behind her. Let his angel of an ex-mate sort it out if she was so perfect. He slept in it too, after all. Did he? Or was he in her bed last night? She halted immediately, the thoughts crossed her mind. She looked back at the door with longing in her eyes, her curiosity strong. She hadn't really taken note of it before, but now that her mind has brought the possibility forward, she might as well check to be sure. She took steps towards the shared bedroom, her feet sunk cozily into the fur rug that lined the center of the average-sized hallway. The laughter was like a shard of glass piercing through her back till it dug into her heart. She fought the urge to roll her eyes, who laughed like they swallowed a fucking mic. Attention-seeking liar. Ugh! Hate was an understatement for the feeling that crawled deep within her heart at the thought of Amma and her smug-ass smile. Her feet took a U-turn and headed for the living room. What was so funny anyways? She got there just in time to see her fear being confirmed. Khai had his hands around Amma's waist, a smirk on his face as Amma pulled him closer by the head. Even worse, he nuzzled his face in the crook of her neck, exactly what couples did. There was no other explanation for what she saw, what she stood with a leg in the living room and another still in the hallway. "Oh, Julie," she called, a sugar-sweet smile on her face. Pretentious bitch. Julie's lips curled as her eyes stayed fixed to the spot where Khai had his head rested, just before she had intruded on their couple time, just before her shot up and away from her, like her neck was suddenly on fire. Great speed, buddy. Really great acting, like he didn't just bring his freaking ex and was getting all cozy with her while she apparently slept the morning away. Julie made a non-committal sound at the back of her throat and walked fully into the bathroom. Her hand tucked stiffly by her sides as she turned her glare to Khai. If he noticed, he either chose not to acknowledge it yet or wasn't even dazed by it. It better not be the latter, or they would really have a problem. "Good to see you're awake, finally." She hated to admit it, but Amma had a wonderful voice. "I thought maybe you decided to sloth your way through the morning or something." She burst out into laughter, like she'd just said the funniest thing since comedy was invented. She laughed uncaring for a very long minute, only stopping when she finally realized Khai hadn't joined in. Julie fought back the smile at the look of annoyance on her face. It only lasted a second before it was replaced by a smile, a taunting smile. "Anyways, now that you decided to join the world of the living," she dragged, "I was just heading out," she said over her shoulder as she pulled the arm of her small carry-on. Khai didn't move to help. She eyed him strangely but shrugged it off quick enough. The relief Julie felt the moment the words left the liar's lips was unlike any she'd ever felt. It was short-lived. "But of course, I'd be back soon. I just have a few things to take care of and maybe grab a little more clothing this time." She laughed to herself. Nothing was funny. Julie plastered on a smile right until the moment her back was to her before she slammed the door angrily. "What was that all about, Khai? What happened to it was nothing. She hurt you, she was stupid, and you know better, huh?" She snapped at the brink of yelling in his face. What was what all about?" he dragged. "Don't call me stupid, Khai. Don't. The least you could do after that stunt is be honest," she warned, her anger attaining even greater heights. "There's nothing going on. She's my ex-mate, and that's all there is to it. There's really nothing between us. There can never be," he explained. His feet closed the distance between them. He reached for her cheeks, but she turned away before he could touch her skin. "Know what? Forget it." She turned away and headed back to the bedroom. That tequila would be more than appreciated. For the umpteenth time, Khai cast a worried gaze at Julie. An uncomfortable feeling settled in his chest as he watched her do anything and everything but look at him. He hated how she made deliberate efforts to avoid him. Everything had been going on so well with them. What could have brought that up? He watched her with worry overshadowing every other emotion he felt. She shrugged on a loose blouse. Her baby bump grew by the day, impossible to hide no matter how loose her outfit was. She piled on item after item into her sachet, her hands busy, her eyes avoidant. Frowning, he left the room, a mix of anger and frustration crippling him as he forced his way to the living room. She was so annoying. Why couldn't she just talk about it, or better, trust him? Trust he wouldn't be so stupid as to go back to an ex that hadn't even blinked an eyelid before she up and left for her modeling career after years of blissful courtship. after exchanging promises to always stay by each other. Who was he kidding? If the roles were reversed, he'd probably had decapitated the other guy without a second, though. But still, Amma wasn't any random girl. She wasn't even someone he could see himself with again, but Julie obviously thought otherwise, and worse, she refused to believe him, trust his intentions. He groaned as the fear in his heart made itself known again. Try as he might, he couldn't shake the indescribable feeling that one day he would wake up and find Julie gone without any information as to her whereabouts. He leaned back against the couch only to jolt back up at the sound of footsteps, her footsteps. He turned just in time to see her look away. So he wasn't invisible after all, he thought. He looked at her, a longing in his eyes as he pleaded without words for her to speak to him. It didn't even have to be about Amma, just anything would do, as long as she wasn't ignoring him, acting like he was nothing but a living, breathing statue she had no use for. A sadness filled his eyes as he watched her push up the sachet on her shoulders and exit the living room, shutting the door gently behind her. Julie released a breath as the chilly air kissed her cheeks. She hated it. She hated all of it. She missed him. She wanted to speak to him, wanted to ask him to come with her. The thoughts of Khai tracing the outline of the baby's image on an ultrasound had her heart clenching, and even the baby expressed its appreciation as a sharp jab hit the edge of her stomach. She clenched her teeth and waited for the pain to ebb away slowly. She eyes his dark blue luxury car jealously. Life would be so much easier and cheerier if she just spoke to him. But she couldn't, not when he'd taken her for a fool, promised Amma wasn't that important only to hug her like a long-lost lover the very next day. No, she couldn't speak to him about it. Things had gone beyond merely having a talk. She shook the misplaced thought from her mind and crossed the driveway till she was out of the gate. The cab she had ordered arrived just in time. Without a look back, she pulled on the door and slipped carefully into the back seat. The car pushed forward gently. Immediately, the door shut. The ride was fast and thankfully silent. The cab driver had even been kind enough to play classical music, which helped calm her nerves, but sadly did nothing for the sadness that settled in her chest. The hospital building came into view, and she thanked the driver as she shut the door. She strolled down the hospital lobby, a little distracted and a lot bothered. She was so out of it that she walked past her doctor's office without realizing it. Was beginning to wonder if you'd still be coming in today. The middle-aged woman smiled, her eyes wrinkled at the edge. It was contagious. Julie returned her smile as she took the seat across from her. The usual questioning began, some questions familiar, others new and some odd. She answered every single one as truthfully as she could. After that, the doctor led her to a dimly lit room. Machines beeped almost silently. She was used to the examination room. The dim lighting always helped soothe whatever nerves she had. The doctor performed the usual tests and examined her stomach for a few moments. Okay, everything seems fine. The doctor broke the silence in the room, a smile on her face. Julie sighed in relief. The last thing she needed was for something to be up with the baby. Julie's face broke into a real smile. Thank you. She meant every word. The doctor, Elise, nodded and ushered them out of the room. Would that be all? Julie asked. Yes, you're good to go, she assured. But don't forget to show up for your next appointment. You can pick up the card from the reception. She reminded. Julie nodded and did as she was told before she stepped out into the busy street. She spotted the taxi from earlier and got in without much ceremony. She hated to admit it, but she was a bit scared. Her shoulders relaxed in the safety of the cab. She'd been having nightmares where she was being attacked by the rogues. The news of the recent werewolf attacks did nothing to ease them in any way. Her eyes fluttered slowly, her feeble attempt at calming her racing heart. The attacks had gotten more frequent. It was almost a daily occurrence. The breach between the human and werewolf society had only gotten larger and larger as each day passed by. No one was safe, not even the supposed wife to a powerful alpha. The four walls of the cab felt safe as the hunk of metal rolled slowly down the highway. She turned her gaze to the busy road. Flashes of trees and blurry images of people crossed her vision as the car sped down the road. She released a shaky breath. She was as safe as she could be in a cab that could be traced, not a sidewalk or a chocolate shop. She peered slyly at the driver. He was a middle-aged man with more hair than she'd seen recently on anyone his age, but he had the kind of eyes a person could trust, downturned and wrinkled at the side whenever he would speak to grab her attention. He didn't have the typical werewolf built. He was like a regular man, not lanky, but not shirt-ripping muscular either. His hair was neatly combed back, so at least he wasn't living under a bridge somewhere without a comb. He wasn't a rogue, she decided. The sound of a ringtone blaring from her bag snapped her attention to the forgotten device. She shuffled through items in her bag till she found and pulled it out. Her eyebrows scrunched together at the unknown number. The last 4 digits weren't familiar either. With apprehension clawing at her throat, she swiped right. A familiar voice came from the other end of the line, on the verge of being ashy, but with a soft yet confident undertone to it. The audacity of this lady. How did she even get her number? She wondered. Hello? The voice repeated, snapping her out of her murderous thoughts. Her blood boiled. Why did she sound innocent? Like she hadn't walked into her life and ruined everything? Like she didn't, after months of bliss, cause the same doubts she thought she had healed from to creep back in without warning. Julie held her breath and counted in her head, praying she would take the hint and end the call. 1, 2, 3. She opened her mouth like a fish begging for water and counted again. 1, 2, 3. The driver snuck a glance at her, his eyes worried, the question unbalanced at the top of his tongue, but she didn't need to hear it to know she was probably overthink it and making the poor man worried for nothing. It was just Amma. She could handle this. She was stronger than this. She patted herself on the back mentally, worried she would look crazy if she suddenly patted her back for real. How would that even work? Are you there, Julie? Julie's eyes widened as she realized the witch was still on the call. Hello, who's this? She asked cautiously, like she didn't already know. Well, she didn't, and if she had to be honest, she wouldn't mind being wrong either. Her hopes fled into the wind as the confusion cleared from voice as she said, It's Amma, Khai's mate. Sorry, ex-mate. She chuckled shyly. Yeah, right. Of course that was an honest mistake. Julie rolled her eyes before responding. Oh, was all she could offer. She could just picture the smug look on her stupid face. I just wanted to thank you for welcoming me into your home with open arms, she began. Julie rolled her eyes. Who was she kidding? I would like to appreciate you properly, too. How about dinner today? She asked. Julie's eyes narrowed into slits like she could actually see her. An uncomfortable feeling settled in her chest as she waited for her to continue, because it made no sense. The only communication they had had before was when she'd walked away from Amma and Khai when he had agreed to let her stay. That had been the exact opposite of what Amma currently praised her for. I can't, ma, she began to say. The last thing she needed was to leave herself exposed and worse with Amma. Her belly had become very obvious, and it didn't take a genius to know she was pregnant, even easier to assume it was Khai's, and they wouldn't be wrong. I won't take no for an answer. Amma cut in easily. I really can't. It's no longer safe to be out so late. She tried to explain, deliberately leaving out the part where it had everything to do with the frequent werewolf attacks. She feared Amma and what she could do, considering she was a werewolf, but that was nothing compared to the fear she felt when she thought of Sour being attacked by Adrian again, or worse, by a werewolf she knew nothing about. And you think someone strong enough to be chosen by the moon goddess as a match for one of the strongest alphas can't handle a little protection duty? Don't insult me. The unsaid human in her tone. Julie, hands fisted by her side. What was with Amma and coming to ruin her day at the most inopportune time? Couldn't she just for once look past her request and take no for an answer? She didn't want to spend the next hour pretending to like the spoilt brat. And worse, she'd have to fake a smile all through too. She almost laughed out loud at the thought. Her face would most likely betray her, so why was she even worried? An image of the tattoo flashed in her mind. Oh yeah, the non-existent safety if she decided to move on her own that late. I don't think Khai would be happy coming home to find out I'm not back. She tried another route. You might be under his control or follow his instructions like a little puppy, but I'm not. I've requested to have dinner with you, and there's absolutely nothing Khai can do about it," she boasted. Julie rolled her eyes at the sheer arrogance in her statement. She not only disregarded her, but had surprisingly disregarded Khai as well in one statement. Red flashed in her eyes. She really had some nerves, and worse, she didn't seem like she was going to give up. At least not unless Khai called out of the blues and canceled whatever plans she had in mind instead. With a huff of air, she reluctantly said, "All right then, where?" She scrunched her face, already dreading the supposed dinner with Amma. "I'd text it to you so you can refer back to it without having to call every 5 minutes." She laughed like she'd cracked the funniest of joke. She was the joke, Julie thought as she ended the call. Her phone chimed before her hand even so much as touched the couch. She tapped the message. Thankfully, it was close by, in the opposite direction, but close by nonetheless. She let out a frustrated puff of air as she handed the phone over to the driver. "Better to get this over with now," she muttered to herself. The driver nodded and took a U-turn, gunning down in the opposite direction. Julie felt a little safer as her phone chimed again. Her heart relaxed as she stared at the delivered just beside the address she forwarded to Khai. "We're here, ma'am," the driver called, pulling her out of her train of thoughts. Julie's head snapped to the window. The restaurant towered over the car, casting a dark shadow. The sun stayed hidden behind the glass building, the only sign of its presence being the glint that bounced off the edges of the glass. Julie shielded her eyes against the piercing shine as she made her way into the restaurant. She immediately felt out of place as her eyes settled on the fine dining before her. The walls were immaculately decorated with streaks of gold, emphasizing the already beautifully painted walls. Chandeliers that looked more expensive than her annual salary drooped low over the crowd of marble-type tables decorating the ground level. Her slippers were quiet against the rug that only further emphasized the attention to detail of the restaurant. Dread pooled in her stomach as a man, dressed in the typical black and white uniform most waiters wore, approached her. She had no idea what she was supposed to say or what Amma's surname was. All she knew was she was the controlling werewolf bitch who had her claws wrapped around her husband. That definitely wouldn't go down well for description, she refuted the thought. "Good day, ma'am. Would you like a table?" His voice sounded genuinely unsure, and Julie had to fight the urge to roll her eyes. Did anyone actually prefer to stand as opposed to having their butts puckered between those soft-looking cushions disguised as chairs? "Yes, please," she voiced. The waiter looked back at her awkwardly as if waiting for something. Was he actually expecting a tip before offering his services fully? You'd think with how expensive the place looked they'd have better behaved staff. She shoved her hand into her bag and grudgingly handed the man $10. She couldn't believe she was actually going to give him that much for asking her if she wanted a damn table. The waiter eyes the cash, the top of his mouth wrinkled before he caught himself and smiled. "Ma'am, we don't do that here, at least not in cash." He plastered a smile on his face. Julie's cheeks reddened in embarrassment. "Why were you standing there then?" she accused barely above a whisper. His brows lifted, his lips curled in an O shape as he asked, "Don't tell me." He trailed off as if scared to even think about it. "Don't tell me you actually thought I was demanding a tip." It was more of a statement than a question, and it successfully made Julie want to hide behind the entry desk and never come out. I thought that," she stuttered, her cheeks getting redder by the minute. "I was asking for a reservation card, weren't you issued one?" "Oh, I didn't make a reservation. The thing is, I was actually invited by someone." "Oh, the restaurant is usually fully booked, so most times only reservations get a seat. I'm really sorry." He actually looked apologetic, which was shocking to say the least. "Can I get the name of the person who invited you?" he inquired. "Sure," she said, with way too much certainty for someone who didn't even know her last name. Amma Findleton." She muttered the last part, hoping the first name would be enough. "Sorry, I didn't get that. Amma what?" "Findleton." She coughed into her hand to mask the sound. "Sorry, ma'am. I would need you to speak up. Amma Castle." The waiter's eyes widened in shock, his eyes fixed on something behind her, someone. Julie hated to admit it, but the husband-distracting bitch just saved her a lot of embarrassment. Okay, I think our editors can work with these. Mark, the photographer, smiled, exposing the streaks of white in the mess that was his mustache. All right then, I have to run now. Call my assistant when they're about to publish. She arched an eyebrow at him. You know I would, he nodded. She exited the studio uncertain. She'd been in the same room as the human girl, spent a few days with her, but she couldn't quite place a finger on what category she fell under. Her initial judgment had been she wouldn't be a problem. She was shy enough to override, but she'd been sassy when she tried to get away from dinner plans. Maybe she was just reading too much into it, she decided as she slipped past the chauffeur and into the back seat. Without any exchange of unnecessary words, he set the path for the restaurant. We're here, ma'am. His voice called over the partition. Barely a minute later, the door opened up. The restaurant is like she remembered. It was almost like it was just yesterday. Khai had led her out of the car, all smiles and charm. Ah, the good times. She pushed her way into the restaurant, her head hung high as she approached the pair by the entry desk. The poor thing looked so out of place, it was pitiful. She watched as Julie wiped a sweaty hand on her dress, if it could even be called that. Deciding to put her out of her misery, Castle. She gave with a smile at the waiter. He looked stunned for a brief second before he caught himself. He swiped the pad he held for a few moments. Please, follow me, he urged, and led the way down the spacious room till they arrived at a corridor. He spun them through the turn, revealing an elevator that looked more like a gateway to a palace. He pushed a button, gestured for them to go in, and stepped in right after. The ride up was awkward. Julie took peeks at Amma, who towered over her. Ugh, she even had her height going for her, she thought. She'd fit right in by Khai's side. Her heart sunk further as she studied her look. Her skin was flawless, her hair swept from her face but wildly styled in bold body waves that accentuated her already enviable eyes. If she wasn't insecure about her look before, she definitely was now. Every curve and edge of the fabric was flattened to perfection, and it didn't help either that her pink and blue floral patterned sundress did nothing but draw attention to her eyes even more. Julie shoved down the waist of her gown. The sheer size of the material mocked her as it jumped back up to over her collarbone. She sighed just as the ding rang from the elevator, and the waiter led them finally to their seats. We have equally qualified staff here. Just tap on the bell when you'd like to make your order or need assistance. He pointed towards a bell icon on the table, and Julie had to pinch herself from gasping. The table was freaking computerized. All right. Thanks. Amma tossed over her shoulders and took the seat closer to the thick curtains. The room was less crowded than the entrance hall had been, dim lit, and had a live band playing soothing music not too far from their table. The chandeliers were endless and reminded Julie of a ballroom. Everything was hush-hush, like everyone had a meeting and decided to speak only in whispers. That, or the room was spacious enough to stretch their voices too far and thin to be loud. You couldn't make a quick stop. Amma's voice broke her out of her trance. I could, why? She eyed the other woman in confusion. And you chose to stick with that? Her lip curled in disapproval as she pointed to her maternity gown. Julie blood boiled. It wasn't enough that she was forced against her will to be there. Now she felt she could judge her wardrobe. How about she tries carrying a pup that sucked your life force directly? See if playing dress-up for a date you'd rather not be at would be top priority. She bit her tongue instead and chewed out, Yes, any problem? Amma eyed her for one long second, taking extra long on the hem of her gown, before she shook her head and looked away. So why am I here? Julie pushed. The sooner she could create distance between them, the better. Why the rush? She fired back. I have to get back home. I don't have time to play Barbie tea party. She tried to bite back the snark, but failed. Shit, there was no need to be bitchy, but the lady in question deserved it. Still, she began to say. Amma's chest shook as she laughed, an actual laugh. Julie stared at her in confusion. Okay? What's funny? She muttered barely above a whisper. Amma chuckled. Her laughter slowly died down before she said, The fact that you have nothing Aluna should and yet have deluded yourself into thinking trapping Khai with a baby would be enough. She shrugged casually. Okay, that was it. It was obvious the longer she stayed that she had been right. Amma invited her to worsen her mood, insult her, throw all the advantages she had over her in her face. Like what the actual hell? Sure, she wasn't the best choice out there considering what the demands were, but she had a functioning brain and most of all, Khai loved her. Her skepticism rose as flashes of Khai with Amma invaded her mind. She looked back at Amma and shook her head. No, he loved her, not Amma. He would not have risked his life for her if he didn't. He didn't even have to. He could have easily let her die quietly, but he didn't. He risked his life for her. He loved her, she decided. Ignoring Amma's very direct jab at her ego, she asked. Her fingers gripped the chair tightly. Can we order? Her voice was calm. Good. She may not be as beautiful or graceful as Amma, may not have her unique dress sense or the confidence to command the air around her, but she was not going to act out like an uncontrolled child. Sure. She responded and pushed on the bell icon. Barely a second later, someone stood by their desk. Good day, ladies. Are we ready to order? A lady that looked to be in her 20s greeted cheerfully, either oblivious to the tension between said ladies or choosing to ignore it and mind her business. Yes, I'd have the lemon chicken with some teriyaki sauce, and for drinks, a bottle of your oldest red wine would do. She listed out. The waitress nodded, then turned her attention to Julie. And you? She asked, eyeing the untouched menu before her. Amma chuckled. Please excuse her. She's not used to being in places like these, and I'm sure cheesy burgers and what other unhealthy nonsense she's used to isn't on your menu. She drawled. She'd have what I'm having. She added. The waitress gave Julie an apologetic look. Would that be fine, ma? She tried. Amma pinned the poor lady with a glare so intense even she would have shrunk back and into the ground. She would have what I'm having, she repeated. Her voice left no room for argument. There was that control again, the control Julie envied and wished she had. Maybe she was perfect for Luna. She had everything they wanted anyways, beauty, confidence, influence, but most importantly, power. Maybe Khai would be better suited with a Luna just as, or almost as powerful as himself, wouldn't he? He wouldn't have to run across the country to rescue her all the time. He'd had a partner just as ruthless as he was. If it was what he needed, then why did she feel this reluctance in her chest whenever she remembered how they had been so close? She sighed as she leaned back against the chair, confused. Would that be all? He glanced around the room for any objections. The president opened his mouth to speak, but thought against it and shook his head instead. No, you still haven't addressed the attacks. I'm working on it. He ground it out. Isn't that what you've been down our throat for weeks now? Since the very first attack, isn't that the same promise you've repeated like a damn broken record? He suddenly flared up, shoving all thoughts of respect and every ounce of fear aside. People were dying. Humans die every day. It was about time they stood their ground against those animals and quit the wishful thinking. I would advise you watch your tone, Anthony. Louis, a burly-looking man, warned. His wolf threatened to break loose as he stared the human representative down. I believe his right to speak has not been rescinded alongside the attacks, Louis. A man who shared very close similarities with Anthony rose from his seat, looking ready to charge if the need should arise. He might not get to use said rights if he continues to speak in that manner. Brian thundered at him, just as angry. How can we find a permanent solution to this if we're divided amongst ourselves? Khai paused and pinned each man with a glare so intense anyone would be stupid to speak against him at that moment. The fire behind his eyes burned hot. His wolf barely held back. Brian, Louis, and Leo reluctantly retreated to their seats, but Anthony held his position, albeit shakingly. The tick in his jaw was palpable as he glanced at the president. Unspoken words were shared between them, but he held his tongue, the respect he held for the president stronger than his anger. Anthony, take a seat. The president finally spoke for the first time since the men lunged for each other. Anthony's face twisted in displeasure as his glare turned to the president. Don't make me repeat myself, he snapped. That scared the man into action. He glared at Khai a final time and reassumed his seat. Now that we're all with our senses again, what is the plan, Khai? He wasn't smiling. His eyes were set on Khai, but they looked beyond him, distant. The anger behind his gaze sizzled hot, but he looked more relaxed than anyone else in the room. I'm working on it. Khai grounded out, tired of the questioning already. Julie was with Amma, and only the moon goddess knows what those two were up to. Khai, you know at this point we're going to need more than that. That's all I can offer for now. Khai reiterated. His eyes flared in visible anger, and that is not good enough. It doesn't even cross the surface considering the severity of the situation. And you think I'm playing around all day? I'm working on it. But sadly, things aren't moving as fast as they should, but I refuse to sit here and waste more of the time I don't have bickering. He jumped to his feet, furious with how bold they had become, how freely they spoke to him, disregarded him. He forced a breath out. They were agitated. Their people were dying. He had to tread carefully. The situation of the negotiations between both societies was very delicate as it was. He couldn't act on his emotions. Doing that would get the society nowhere. The werewolves are no longer welcomed here, he said calmly, too calmly. What does that even mean? I believe I was very clear, Khai, he said through gritted teeth. I don't want to hear of a new werewolves crossing our borders, and you are to take your people with you back to whatever pack you all belong to. He snapped, his cool slipping for a few seconds. He plastered the bank mask on his face before he said, Your kind has caused us more trouble than what the protection you offer is worth, and we have had enough of it. He finished and signaled to the guard behind him. His wolf tugged at the ends of his very being as he listened to the president speak. It's for the treaty. You can't risk the negotiations you've worked on for years break down without finding the reason. I understand your anger, he began slowly, the chant not as calming as it should be. Julie needs me to be done sooner rather than later. He had to be out and on his way in a few minutes. The surprise he planned for Julie to clear all doubts of his care for her depended on it. I understand your anger, and I assure you I am working tirelessly on it, and I won't stop until I find the bastard responsible for all of this. I would do so as soon as possible, too, and this isn't just a half-baked promise. He confessed. The resolve in his voice didn't go unnoticed by the president. He leaned back, not completely at ease, but appeased, at least for the time being. He didn't respond, but he didn't tear up the negotiation papers either. That was good enough. Khai nodded and excused himself. The werewolf representatives followed closely behind him. He had only brought 2 of them so as not to spook the human representatives even further. They were already on edge as it was, bringing a total of 6 representatives, as is the usual agreement, would most likely not end well. They get even more unsettled with each meeting, Louis pointed out. Tell me about it. Khai sighed, exhausted. First, it was Amma always making a move and inviting himself and Julie to dine with her at a trendy restaurant, despite already knowing he had someone that carried his child, his heir. Of course, he had turned it down immediately. Julie was already unsettled as it is, inviting her to a dinner. Amma was hosting would send the wrong message, but it was a good idea, a good distraction while he set up a surprise for her. Amma could keep her company for a few hours till he was done. But it was still Amma. He had to be quick. I have an idea, Amma said with a knowing smirk. The curl of Julie's lips was almost immediate. She snuck a quick glance behind her. The exit looked more than tempting at that moment. What idea? She braved the question, knowing the other lady was going to tell her whether she asked or not. You know, I'd really hate to seem like a bitter bitch who just says stuffs to worry a poor, pregnant, fragile human, she cooed. The sound like grating sandpaper. So how about I show you that if it came down to a choice between you and I, it wouldn't be much of a choice for Khai, huh? She smacked both hands together, a sugar-sweet smile plastered on her face. Julie knew what it was even before she opened her mouth to speak. She recognized the signs all too well and knew this was only a challenge to rub it in her face. It was all Khai's fault. If he'd only stuck to the plan, to the path he created for them, she wouldn't be there. If he'd only pushed her away when she tried to hug him instead of leaning in like a long-lost lover, then maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't be stuck, forced to seat across from someone who did nothing but threaten her pregnancy by just opening her mouth and saying all the wrong things. "What do you have in mind?" She leaned back on her seat. Her back had begun to ache again. The relief she felt evident by the slow exhale she let slip as the soft pad of the chair cushioned her weight. "If you really believe Khai loves you, then try calling him." The smile stretched across her lips, painfully slow. It was a bait. Anyone with half a brain would know Amma was baiting her. "If he truly cares about you, he will come right away." She arched a brow at her, the challenge shining in those infuriating, beautiful eyes. She knew with what she'd seen, with how tight that hug had been, that it wasn't going to end in her favor. She'd just end up hurting herself again, and worse, Amma would be a witness to it. But some absurd reason she just needed to know, needed to be sure. About what exactly? Maybe she was just being a hopeless fool for him. "I mean, I would totally understand you not wanting to risk knowing the truth, or is accepting it the problem," she began to say mockingly. "Let's do it," she snapped. "Brave one, aren't you?" she mocked. Julie plastered a smile on her face, a stark contrast to the anger bubbling in her being as she yanked her phone from her purse. Worry pitted in her stomach as a thought crossed her mind. He hadn't even called to check in like he normally would. She wasn't home yet, and he hadn't called to ask why she wasn't home yet. Or wasn't he home yet? Probably. Her thumb hovered over that one contact. Just one letter had never been so scary. Shoving everything down her throat, she tapped on it with a gulp. The letter K plastered across her phone's screen taunted her as she waited for the dial. Waiting for him to pick up would be even more dreadful. It dropped. The words "user busy" stayed plastered across her phone screen. With dread pooling in the pit of her stomach, her fingers colder than ice, she tapped on his contact. "Please, just one time, just once. Please pick up." She almost wept when she tried a third time. With barely any breath leaving her lungs, she licked her lips as she waited. It was taking longer than the last time to say busy, just a few seconds, but that's something. "Please pick up," she pleaded, not daring to glance at Amma. She didn't even need to look to know she had a smile plastered across her moneymaker. It dropped. It freaking dropped. It was no use at this point, but no, just no. She pushed harder on the stupid K and tried again and again and again and got even more frantic with each dropped call. "Well, would you look at that?" The glee in her voice was palpable as she pulled out her phone, her perfectly manicured nails a show of their own. "I would like to say I feel sorry for you, but I'm not one to lie either." Her teeth kissed like she actually felt sorry, to others or myself. She added and let out a tsk. Julie hid her head. She couldn't face her. Not yet, at least not with tears brimming at the edges of her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. She wasn't going to cry. No, she wasn't even going to let a single drop of tears drop, at least not with Amma smiling down at her like a victor would his or her victim. The sound of a dial snapped her out of it, and her ears perked up in attention. This was his last chance. If the call dropped, there would be no winner. She could just chalk it up to wrong timing. "Hello." One word. Just a simple word, but that one word held so much meaning at that moment. He answered. It wasn't wrong timing. She was a joke to him. Amma tossed her curls behind her as she lifted the phone to her ear, only to change her mind and put it on speaker instead before placing the phone on the table. "Khai, you there?" she called, loud enough for anyone on the other side of the room to hear. "Yes, Amma. What's wrong? Hope J." She quickly switched it from speaker and pulled the phone to her ear, her smile slipping for a quick second before she mouthed, "Sorry," with feigned pity. The defeated look on Julie's face was well worth all the stress she had to go through to pull it off. If she heard her name from him one more time, she just might behead the pitiful human, remind him that Julie was still inferior to her, no matter the love he showered on her. She deserved to be Luna, not her. She deserved to carry his child, his heir, not a useless human like her. Getting Julie to agree to something so stupid had been the easy part. Getting access to Khai's phone to block Julie's contact, though, had been almost impossible. He even saved it with emojis. She could have sworn the man didn't even know the things existed, but it'd been there, a freaking laughing emoji and a big bright red heart. Fuck her. "Yeah, fine, all good," she waved off easily. Her voice got impossibly louder as she whined. Wait, not good. Julie's hand snapped to her ears at the annoying sound. There, she gulped, like she was in fact frightened and not seated in a very comfortable seat at an expensive restaurant. There was an accident, Khai. It's bad. It's really bad. I don't know what to do, she cried. What do you mean an accident? Where? Julie's heart ached just hearing the panic in his voice. For a lie, for Amma. He was worried about Amma while the lying bitch sat there tossing a smug smile her way. Just before the restaurant. It's really not looking good, Khai. She wailed like she could at any second. How? Wasn't he looking? Khai rushed, his voice rising an octave higher. There's no time to explain. I really need your help. It's serious. Get here quick. I'm on my way. Don't move, he called just before Amma tapped on the mute icon. Julie had listened intently to their exchange and believed what she was hearing. Would you look at that? She drawled, pulled the phone closer, and smiled triumphantly before, saying, He's asking for the address. I guess when he said he'd be coming right now, he meant right now. Amma didn't waste any time to gloat. Julie couldn't feel her head. She grabbed it just to be sure. Her eyes slammed shut at the wave of nausea that ran through her. For someone who sounded so sure, I would have expected he would at least answer there. She was. Still talking, she wasn't done. Amma knew that might as well just be the only chance she would get, to get rid of the pesky human, and she planned to milk every bit of it. Khai had chosen Amma. It was clear as day who his priority was. She felt like she'd been run over by a moving train. Why her? Why did it always have to be her? Amma hung up and turned her unwelcomed gaze to Julie, who couldn't bear to even look in her direction. With a smug look on her face, she said, I told you, didn't I? Could have saved yourself some embarrassment, but you just had to get so carried away by whatever gestures he awarded you out of pity, didn't you? Amma pushed, a feeling of pure ecstasy settling in her chest at the sight of Julie's tears. She felt dizzy. Her world collapsed at that moment, right before her eyes. He was coming. He not only answered Amma's call on the first ring after ignoring hers, but he was on his way to her side. Fine, Amma had claimed to be involved in an accident, but she couldn't give two shits. He shouldn't, either. Amma was his past, should be his past. He shouldn't run to her the moment she called for help. She knew other people. Okay, maybe she was being a little inconsiderate, considering the situation Amma had painted for him, but he hadn't even picked up her call. It dropped. Not once, but 3 times in a row. She would be a fool to not still recognize her place in his life. Amma still held his heart, even after all those years after hurting him, leaving him to lick his own wounds. He still loved her, was still willing to protect her. She'd been a fool. Yes, she'd been a fool to believe Khai could ever care for her, much less love her. With shaky hands and more trust in her legs than her voice, she stood from the seat that suddenly felt like it had spikes on it. Without another word, Julie silently walked away from the laughing werewolf and out of the restaurant, not even caring when the waiter from before approached her as she made her exit. Without her companion. Julie had no idea where exactly she was going. All she knew was she needed to be out of there and as far away from it as possible. Just the thought of Khai rushing to be by Amma's side was enough to break her heart into a million pieces. What then would he shatter if she had to watch it happen? Her bones? She probably shouldn't be on her own, especially since she had no idea where she was going, especially when she hadn't even told Khai where she was headed. She burst out laughing all of a sudden, a pain-filled and ingenuine sound. What was she actually going to say? Hey Khai, you picked your ex over your supposed mate, and now she's headed down a road she has no idea where it leads. Her heart ached, everything hurt, but still she kept walking. She got strange looks. Every time she would let out in laughter out of the blue, but she really couldn't care what anyone thought of her. The man she loved, the man she carried a child for, had chosen someone else. And, worse, that someone had been his ex. She had complained, had told Khai many times that she hadn't felt at ease with Amma back, but Khai had waved it off, asking her to trust him instead. She couldn't trust him. She just couldn't do that to herself again. Julie had been on her feet walking blindly for at least an hour in a direction she had no idea about. She had been so focused on her pain, on clearing the confusion that plagued the mind that she hadn't even noticed when the sun bid its farewell and retired for the day. The crescent moon cast a gentle glow over the street, illuminating her path. On a normal day, she'd feel at ease, calm, but instead there was a storm brewing in her veins. Her head snapped to the bushes, her mind forced awake at a sound coming from the distance. She had heard it before. It was the howl of a werewolf. It was faint, but there was no mistaking it. Her heart jumped into her throat as the sound got louder, sounded closer. She reached for her phone. Immediately, her fingers hovered over the name for only a second before she shoved her hurt and pride down, the fear clouding her mind stronger than the dagger digging into her heart. A tear slipped down her cheek when the line dropped. No, not now. He could pause whatever it was. He was busy to speak with Amma. With shaky hands and drifting eyes, she tried again. She grabbed her chest, the pain worsened by the beeping from the device. Her knees gave out beneath her as she stared at his name with tear-filled eyes. Snap! Her head snapped back at the sound. Her breathing hung. Her eyes danced from one tree to the other, trying to trace its source. With barely any air escaping her lungs, she caught sight of a silhouette. Her eyes dilated the size of saucers as flashes of the CCTV camera clashed with the images. Her eyes captured from the present. The legendary killer, the one responsible for the recent attacks on the human. At first, she was skeptical, but as her eyes settled on the tattoo on his arm, she froze. She grabbed onto cold tar as she rushed to her feet. But before she could even get a proper grip of anything tangible, the familiar silhouette rushed into the light, charging right for her at full speed. Razor-sharp teeth slid down his bloodied lips, his pupils narrowed into slits just before they changed color. The night sky was nothing compared to the vacant black he now had for eyes. She opened her mouth to scream for help, but nothing but air escaped her throat as his palms pinned her to the ground. She struggled against his hold. The harder she struggled, the stronger his hold. She winced as sharp claws dug into the skin of her wrist, each contact drawing blood in its wake. His head dipped lower, and the next thing he did forced her still. He took a long whiff of her hair, her neck, and then her chest, fascinated by the rapid beating of her heart. Tears fell from her eyes uncontrollably as his head dipped even lower till the tip of his nose grazed the skin of her neck. He took another long whiff, foaming at the mouth. There was no point. This was how she would die, killed by the hands of the tattooed man, just like many other humans before her. Julie didn't even bother fighting him anymore. What was the point of it anyways? What was she going back to? A man whose heart belonged to another? A man who didn't give two shits about her? She had been okay carrying his child, raising the child away from its father. She truly had been. She didn't know when it happened, but somewhere along the line, she had gotten used to the idea of having Khai in her life, started believing that he would actually be a good father to his unborn child, a good mate for her. But after witnessing what happened with Amma, she couldn't be so sure anymore. The light caught his sharp teeth, and Julie slammed her eyes shut and waited. Nothing. She waited a breath. Two. Still nothing. She opened her eyes to see the tattooed killer now mimicking her, pinned by another wolf, a wolf she knew all too well. Khai. A snarl rang painfully loud as the wolf bit into Khai and drew blood. Khai's wolf stumbled backwards, for just a second, but that had been more than enough. The tattooed killer took the chance and charged before Khai could recover. A howl that sounded more like a cry broke free from Khai's wolf at the impact. Thick red blood dripped down onto its white fur, 3 claw marks glared on its face. Almost like it never happened, Khai lunged at the killer wolf with a speed so fast Julie could barely keep track. His claw dug deep into the wolf's stomach. A howl followed soon after, the cry of the killer. Wolf. Julie watched with her heart in her throat as Khai's wolf flung the killer 1 second and slammed it against the oak tree nearby, slammed him against the coal tar, crushed the killer wolf's head beneath. Its claw, she half expected him to pause, catch a breather, but the anger that oozed off of him told a different tale. And she was right. With a growl so animalistic, it spooked even the killer wolf. Khai's wolf dug his sharp claws into the killer wolf's belly, its eyes widening at the impact. Without blinking or so much as a word, he twisted his claw, earning a loud cry of agony from it. Both wolves locked eyes in a battle of power, but it was obvious who held it. Definitely not the one with a giant hole and another wolf's claws in its gut. Another cry, a louder howl, broke from its lips as Kai's wolf dug even deeper, upward and before it. Realized what was happening, pulled its heart from its chest, threw its guts and tossed the still, beating organ on the ground. Claws sprung out from its hind foot, claws that it slammed into the still beating heart, ending it a second time. The heartless wolf fell on its face, dead. Julie's eyes danced from Khai, who had transformed back to his human form, to the still complete wolf, body, and finally to its disintegrating heart. Khai hadn't acknowledged her yet. He just kept staring at the still complete body with way more intensity than any time she'd seen him. He was right. He had been right all along. He suspected magic had been involved, but only now had he been able to confirm his suspicions. It was right there for any werewolf, with their senses still intact, to see. The traces of an ocean blue magical potion that leaked from the hole in its stomach, fur-covered, in specks of rare fairy dust and even rarer crushed ghost orchid. Only witches had access to rare herbs. Like that, only witches knew how to use it to hide their residues. Julie finally snapped out the daze she was in and rose to her feet, which drew the attention of Khai. Even as his eyes followed her every movement, she couldn't shake the question away. Why had he come to save her? Didn't he need to rush to Amma's side? Or shouldn't he be at her side? Why? She blurted, unable to stop herself. Why what? He asked with a confused look on his face. Why did you come to save me? She asked in a smaller voice. He tilted his head to the side like he was studying her for a long minute. Why wouldn't I? Julie shook her head. Still shaken up by how ruthless he had been just moments ago, now wasn't the time to sound like a jealous bride. Nothing. Forget I said anything, she muttered, looking away from him. Shouldn't I have? He asked, his lips in a fine, straight line. It's not that. It's just, she trailed off, suddenly unsure. It's nothing. It's stupid. She shrugged, despite the ache in her chest. Khai closed the distance, and all she could do was watch and let him. He tilted her chin upwards and whispered, Shouldn't I have come? Her eyes slid shut involuntarily at his touch. I thought you would be with Amma. You weren't, answering any of my calls. But right before my eyes, you promised to rush to Amma. She whispered, half hoping he didn't hear and half hoping he did. She needed to know. Khai smiled. It was a kind smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a sad smile. Yeah, about that. The hand holding her face dropped to his side. We've both been played by Amma. He grumbled with a sigh, his heart heavy with the implication of what he'd witnessed. Tonight, heavy with the thought of what Amma had done. How? She stuttered, totally confused. I'd explain, but for now, let's get out of here. We'd continue this later. He rushed, racing to the freshly waxed black Porsche packed not too far off. He slid easily into the back seat. Drive! He ordered, his voice sounding winded, before the door shut behind him. The driver looked back at him confused. Just drive, he yelled, his frustration getting the best of him. The driver snapped out of it and hit the accelerator in no time. Khai's grip on the black leather tightened as they pulled out of the meeting point. He gripped even tighter as images of Julie on the floor, bleeding out, crossed his mind. He slammed his eyes shut and sank his claws into the seat. Amma had one job. Just one job, and she couldn't even do that right. By the time they got near the restaurant, it was already dark out, which did nothing to calm his racing heart. Khai didn't even wait a second. Turn the car around and wait, be fast, he ordered before, rushing off into the restaurant. His heart raced as he searched the parking lot, the entrance, the shops close by, no sign of an accident. His brows kissed in confusion. With an uncomfortable feeling settling in the pit of his stomach, he rushed into the restaurant. He gave Amma's name to the welcome waiter and was led to where Amma was, where she had dealt Julie the worst kind of torture, the mental kind. Where is she? He demanded, his tone hard as his eyes settled on Amma, who sat cross-legged, sipping from a champagne glass. Who? Amma bit down on her cheek to stop herself from smirking. I don't have time for your games, Amma. Where's Julie? He demanded. His voice rose an octave, higher. Her attitude did nothing but grind on his nerve. Well, you might just have to make time. She uncrossed her legs and placed the glass on the table. That's all I ask, all I've been asking since we crossed paths. Her eyes met his, but where hers shone, bright with restrained hope, his shone with anger and disgust. How could she play with something as scary as an accident? And where the hell was Julie? First of all, that is never happening. I gave you all my time once and you tossed it in my face. Secondly, I'd ask only once, where's Julie? His tone left no room for argument. His eyes flared as she kept her mouth shut in defiance. He took a slow, warning step closer, and fear crossed her eyes for a quick second before she huffed and filled up the champagne glass. Realizing what she was doing, he scoffed. I never pegged you as someone who would settle for little party tricks. But guess once again I got it all wrong. He stormed off, away from the woman he had been stupid enough to put his trust in once again. For someone who was always so careful when it came to trust, he seemed to be making a lot of mistakes with Amma. And not the good kind. I never pegged you for a stray puppy who'd run after a human. She spat, the disgust barely concealed. Khai halted in his steps, his hands fisted by his side. His jaw ticked as he turned painfully slow. What was that? He dragged through gritted teeth. The squeak was barely audible, but his heightened senses picked it and took that as her usual cowardice coming to the surface. That's what I thought. He clipped. Remember you place. Her eyes flared in annoyance, and before she could think better of it, she blurted, Yeah, that's why I had to teach your little human that same lesson. The moment the words left her lips, instant regret flooded her senses. All the warning bells screamed at her as Khai stalked painfully slow towards her. The darkness in his eyes had never been clearer as he pinned her with his gaze. The humans around noticed the shift in the energy, but they knew better than to get in the way of two werewolves in disagreement. Khai's gaze shifted to their general direction. Choosing safety, they scurried away from the scene without a second check of their belongings. Without giving her a moment to breathe, his fist clawed around her neck in a death-like hold. What did you do? He thundered, his patience non-existent. Amma gasped for air but kept her mouth shut. Khai tightened his grip and her eyes widened in fear. She tapped furiously on his forearm as tears gathered in the corner of her eyes. I'll talk! She choked, her voice raspy with the strain he placed on her throat. He shoved her to the floor. Start talking, he ordered. She took a deep gulp of air, struggling to fill her lungs. I don't have all day, he snapped, tired of her pitiful drama. I just told her the truth. She spat and choked. Khai arched an eyebrow at her. Which is? He pushed. She was wasting time he didn't have. That you don't care for her. You can't care for a powerless human like her. She let out a dark laugh at the worry on his face. She was stupid enough to bet on it too. Guess you must have really had her. Sprung, she continued, her laugh turning crazed by the minute. Khai's fist was barely an inch from her face, but he stopped mid-punch. He clenched his fist tighter, the veins in his forearm popping with the strength it took to withdraw his fist. You should have seen her face when she called and it dropped. No, you should have seen it when I called and you promised to come rushing the next minute. She continued, completely unfazed by the fact that she almost lost a part of her face to his fist if he hadn't thought better of it. The rage he felt was blinding as the realization of what she had done hit him. He had been so stupid. He was angry at himself, yes, but if Julie wasn't out there on her own with the recent attacks on humans, Amma would have lost her ability to breathe, or more than a few seconds. Heck, she wouldn't even have the throat to speak. If anything happens to Julie, suicide would be a better option, he said in a voice so calm it sent chills down her spine. Immediately he stepped out into the empty street. He let his wolf take the lead to hasten the search. It took him a total of 15 minutes before he caught a familiar scent, a mix of spice, citrus, and something he couldn't classify. Julie. Like moth to a flame, he followed the scent. His eyes glazed red as he finally found her. His heart raced as without a second thought, he lunged at the strange-looking werewolf with its spit dripping down the side of its sharp teeth and onto Julie's clothes. He felt nothing but rage as he sank his teeth into the wolf's vein-covered neck. As he ripped off a mix of flesh and darkened fur, all he felt was relief. All he could be was thankful that he had made it, before the rogue wolf could have dinner. He stumbled in his tracks as he spat out the piece of flesh to reveal shiny blue liquid, not blood. The wolf took his moment of distraction and lunged, but he was quicker and ended it in one long, strenuous minute. He couldn't held the sense of pride that flooded his veins as he looked back at Julie. His brief moment of triumph fled as Julie asked, "Why?" His brows kissed in confusion. "Why what? Why did you come to save me?" she asked in a smaller voice. He wasn't sure why a brief moment of glee passed, but in the end he was more curious than anything. "Why wouldn't I?" he asked. Julie shook her head. "Nothing. Forget I said anything," she muttered, looking away from him. That pissed him off. "Shouldn't I have?" he asked, his lips in a fine straight line. "It's not that, it's just—" She trailed off, suddenly unsure. "It's nothing. It's stupid." She shrugged. That was when he saw it. She was hurt. Khai closed the distance, tilted her chin upwards, and with nothing but fear clawing his chest, he repeated, "Shouldn't I have come?" Her eyes slid shut. "I thought you would be with Amma. You weren't answering any of my calls, but right before my eyes, you promised to rush to Amma." She whispered, and the guilt he felt grew. How had he been stupid enough to trust Amma to stay civil? Khai tried for a smile, but gave it up when she winced. "Yeah, about that." His hand dropped to his side. "We've both been played," he grumbled with a sigh, his heart heavy with the implication of what he'd witnessed tonight. His suspicions were right. Werewolves were being bewitched, and if he were to go with his gut, Amma had a great deal to do with it. How?" she stuttered, totally confused. "I'd explain, but for now, let's get out of here." He smiled, a genuine smile that reminded her how truly doomed she was. "No, explain," she demanded. His eyes twitched, ready to remind her who gave the orders, but as he looked at the fine line on her skin where she'd sustained a scratch, his gaze softened. Without thinking, he explained everything, from his meeting to the surprise to Amma's trick, and when she wouldn't believe him still, he showed her contact on his phone. "I swear on the moon goddess I have never wavered in my determination to make you my Luna," he declared truthfully as his thumb caressed her cheeks tenderly. She didn't need to say it, he knew. They were good. For now,